Humans used to be a very feeble species that couldn't even defend itself against small creatures hundreds of years ago. They used to be pitiful in terms of physical strength and violence. They lacked weapons, were terrible at fighting, and had no method to defend themselves from natural disasters. They'd once discovered a breed of beings with superhuman strength who were so much stronger than them that humanity collectively began calling them nobles. These nobles were initially scared of mankind, but they soon realized that humans are virtually defenseless and harmless. This, combined with the fact that mankind held these nobles in high regard, led to the development of the noblesse oblige concept. This means that every noble is obligated to defend mankind at any costs. In this way, the nobles and the humans formed a very special bond in which the nobles were clearly ranked above the mortal humans and had the respect and admiration of all the humans, who did every task that was required of them, whereas the nobles ensured that no innocent human was ever harmed. Ray, a noblesse, the head of the nobility, fell asleep more than 800 years ago. He had barely just awoken when an unknown intruder pulled his coffin from a safe. He is astounded to see how different the world has become since technology has grown so rapidly, and everywhere he walks, he sees human inventions that were never previously possible. He travels around and eventually locates his servant, Frank. Frank is surprised to meet Ray and quickly pulls him inside his house to tell him about current events in the world. Ray finds it interesting how much the human world has evolved and wishes to see it for herself. Frank, the principal of the high school, enrolls Ray in one of his classes so that he can spend time with modern people and learn about the advancements that he hasn't seen in the preceding 820 years. Ray quickly befriends Shin, a tall, red-haired man who is an amazing martial artist and athlete. He is taken aback by how nonchalantly these humans treat him, the noblesse. He notices that humanity appear to have lost their instincts for recognizing nobility, leading them to feel that they are no longer so reliant on them. One evening, as he was drinking tea with Frank, an unknown guy approached them and introduced himself as M21. He informs them that he is a modified human who was produced by the Union, a wicked scientific organization. They were manufactured in test tubes, never given a name, and were only referred to by their serial numbers, according to him. They were injected with countless drugs and tested medicines to see how they would react, and the conditions were so bad that all of his friends died during one of the other parts of the process, except for him and one of his friends, who both survived and gained superhuman strength and abilities. Numerous hidden organizations then attempted to control the world's power by utilizing them as destructive weapons. Finally, he was able to flee the Union with his companion, who opted to separate for the time being in order to find a purpose for their life. After learning about M21's skills, and how he ended up saving the lives of pupils from this school, the director invited him over. He wants him to stay at his house for the time being and work for him, as the Union will continue to send men after him in an attempt to assassinate him. He pauses for a moment before asking what he wants in return. Frank laughs at him and tells him that he only needs to act as school security for the time being, and M21 agrees. The next day, Rai arrives at school and is greeted by a swarm of females who are captivated by his regal demeanor and grace. He enters inside the classroom and discovers Shin has a shattered hand and is wearing a cast that his friends have doodled on. He decides to give this strange habit a shot and pulls out his marker, drawing all over his cast. He then sits down and begins attending class with them and even goes to lunch with them, where he insists on having ramen every day because he cannot go back to food from his time. After class, Shin and his loser friend, whose name I don't know, began chatting about playing mobile games together and invited Ray to join. Ray, on the other hand, has no concept what a cell phone is and appears perplexed. Shin and the loser explain to him that a smartphone is a highly useful tool in modern times since you can never get lost with it, you'll never be bored, and you can chat to anyone at any time. Ray can't believe such a thing exists and goes up to Frank, who is chilling atop the school with M21 in the twilight. He informs Frank about the technologies Shin mentioned. Frank smiles at him and tells him that the world has changed significantly since Rai went to sleep and that technology like this is now available. The next day, Frank gets Ray the most contemporary and high-spec smartphone which he uses in class. Shin and his friend are both surprised to find him holding the phone, but they are pleased for him. They quickly realize, however, that Ray has no knowledge how to use a phone, as when Shin asks for his phone number and email, Ray looks at him blankly, as if he has no understanding what is going on. The loser friend takes Ray's phone and begins showing him how to use it. He also teaches him how to send an email, which Rai quickly grasps and begins sending to Frank. That day, while eating lunch, the trio heard a lot of noise coming from the school playground and proceeded to investigate. They noticed that a gang of thugs in automobiles has invaded the school grounds and is harassing the female students while beating the boys. Rai is fascinated by this because he has never witnessed humans squabbling amongst themselves in his life. Shin ran in and stopped the hit with his damaged hand as one of the brutes seized the janitor and prepared to punch him. The man accuses Shin of attempting to take his girlfriend. The loser questions Shin's actions, but Shin responds that she was about to tumble off the curb, so all he did was grab her to keep her from falling. The father, on the other hand, has no intention of listening to him out, and his thugs begin abusing the students at his school. Shin cautions him and tells him to leave, but the brute begins punching Shin. He avoids most of the punches, but when he is trapped, he is unable to back off and is hit in the face by one of his punches. Rai looks over the chaos and stares at M21, who really wants to go and stop everything, but is afraid of displaying his superhuman strength because he is attempting to keep a low profile. The brute begins kicking Shin and attempting to stomp on his head, but Shin rolls over. The brute attempts to strike him, but Shin deflects all of his blows before delivering his own straight to his face. The monster becomes further angrier and begins throwing hard blows, which Shin tries to parry with his damaged hand. His cast begins to peel off and the brute strikes him in the gut before slamming him on the loser as they both collapse to the ground. He rushes towards Shin, but is stopped by the janitor, who urges him to leave since he would not let him harm the pupils, but the brute doesn't care and grabs the janitor by the throat. M21, who walked calmly towards him and told him to let the janitor go, interrupted him before he could do anything. If he doesn't want to get beaten up, the brute advises him to piss off. M21 responds once more by urging him to leave the janitor alone, prompting the brute to drop the janitor and attempt to punch him. M21, on the other hand, is light and quick and easily dodges his punch before snatching his chain and slamming his head on the ground. The brute tries to grab his hand to get him to release go, but M21 is far too powerful. He then smashes the brute against one of the cars and threatens to kill him, scaring him so much that he flees with his gang. Everyone applauds M21, who is taken aback because he is not used to being praised. Ray, who is seeing all of this, simply returns inside to finish his ramen as he gradually realizes how dangerous humans have become in comparison to the past. The next day starts as usual, and Shin is late for class as usual. The teacher finally walks in with 2 new students by his side, whom he claims are transfer students from Korea. The guy is short and has a spiky set of hair and introduces himself as Regis, while the girl introduces herself as Sierra. The teacher then tells Shin that it is his responsibility to show them around the entire school, which he reluctantly agrees to. Rai immediately realizes that these students are nobles and not ordinary humans, and even the new students seem to notice Rai's unusually strong aura, which is strong even for a noble. They all sit down for lunch in the afternoon, and Shin notices that even these new students seem to be inept at modern things similar to Rai. Regis tries to use a chopstick but fails, while Sierra decides to simply use a spoon. Later that day, Shin, the loser, Regis, Sierra, and Rai all went back to Frank's place, where they were hanging out when Frank walked in with M21. He is surprised and annoyed to see Shin and his friend making the place dirty, but he knows that they are Rai's friends, so he tells them that they are welcome and goes inside the kitchen to simply wash dishes. When he goes back out, Shin tells him that neither Sierra nor Regis have anywhere to live in this town and asks whether Frank can take them in. Frank again gets annoyed at him, but Rai says that he doesn't mind, which forces Frank to say that he doesn't mind either. The following day, a group of goons stopped Rai, Shin, the loser, and Sierra as they were all walking back to their homes. They all surround the group, and one of them even pulls a knife on Rai. Shin tells them not to harm any of his friends and that he will come with them, so they are all taken to the gang's hideout. They are surrounded by a bunch of hooligans, and their boss looks at Shin and tells him that he's going to learn a lesson today. Shin tells the loser to take Sierra and Rai and move aside while he throws his bag and gets ready for a fight. One of the guys rushes towards him with a bunch, but Shin is easily able to dodge his punch while also dodging an attack from behind and punching him to the ground. Another guy tries to hit him with a wooden staff, but Shin easily dodges him and knees him in the face. 2 more guys try to attack him, but he is easily able to dodge their attacks while delivering a strong counterpunch. Sadly, however, he starts getting swarmed by a bunch of them and gets caught from behind by one of the enemies while another tries to hit him. He is able to defend himself, but again, one guy tries to choke him out from behind, prompting Rai to take a step in order to save him, but Shin shouts at him to stay back and uses his jujitsu skills to throw the big guy off. He keeps getting swarmed and was about to get overwhelmed when Regis and M21 arrive at the scene. Regis tries to interfere, but M21 stops him and tells him not to show his weird power to humans. Regis looks at Shin and realizes that he is not helpless. In fact, he again grabs his momentum and starts beating all of them. Regis is shocked to see a human defending himself and the people around him, as this was the supposed job of the nobles, but M21 tells him that humans have learned to defend themselves when the need comes. One of the goons tries to grab the loser as a hostage, but Shin kicks him before he can reach the loser. The leader of the hooligans finally had enough and took out a gun, pointing it at Shin. M21 decides to intervene at this point and appears in front of the leader, grabbing his hand and pushing him to the ground, while the brute tries to use a steel pipe to hit him. M21 simply uses his arm to defend against the steel pipe, while an angry Shin tries to punch the guy full force in the face, but stops at the last moment when M21 tells him that it's enough. Shin moves back and tells them that if they ever want to take revenge on him, they should attack him while he is alone. They all start walking back home, and Regis comments upon the fact that humans have become very savage in these past years, to which M21 solemnly replies that he has not seen what kind of savage and heartless acts humans are capable of committing now. The next day, they all sit around and have dinner while Regis and M21 bicker with one another as usual. Regis hates the fact that M21 gave up his humanity to gain superhuman powers, whereas M21 hates Regis for calling him a traitor to humanity. They are both interrupted by Frank, however, who has had enough of these freeloaders and tells them to clean up the mess that they create. Sierra is his sweetheart and automatically starts cleaning, whereas Regis argues with Frank while cleaning, asking why Ray doesn't clean. Frank quickly ignores him and tries to shift the conversation, but Regis the midget pushes on and says that even Ray should clean. Before Frank could shut him up, however, Ray simply got up and walked towards him. Frank is terrified of what Ray might do, but to his surprise, he simply walks up, puts one of the empty wrappers into the bin and moves away. Frank lets out a sigh of relief and starts cleaning up. The next day at school, Frank and Rye call M21 in their chamber, and Frank informs him that he has opened his separate bank account from 21. He seems surprised and asks why he would do that. Frank looks at him and tells him that he is working for them, so obviously he needs a bank account where they will send his salary. This completely shocks M21, as before this, he was simply used as a weapon and wasn't paid anything his entire life. This is the first time anyone has offered to pay him a salary, like they would any other normal human. He thanks them from the heart and moves outside. While walking back home in the evening, he was stopped by two men. One's a crazy-looking dude, whereas the other is a total fatty who is eating a chicken leg. The Joker-looking dude tells M21 that they have business with him and calls him by his code name. This immediately rings alarm bells in his mind, as no one apart from the Union knows his code name. He asks them about their identities, and they introduce themselves as Shark and Hammer, but for our convenience, we will call Hammer Fatty because he is fat. Shark reveals that they work for DA5, which he recognizes immediately as the Union's Special Operations Team. He asks them why they are here, to which Shark replies that they are going to take him with them, and they also end up insulting M21's only living comrade. He gets mad immediately, and Shark realizes this, provoking him even more. M21 becomes the Wolverine and rushes towards Shark, trying to hit him, but the Shark is way too fast for him to catch and dodges all of his attacks before kicking him in the gut. He then steps on his chest and tells him that he is just a useless science experiment meant to be discarded. M21 again becomes the Wolverine and strikes at him, but the Shark jumps back just in time. M21 repositions himself, but the Shark doesn't give him time to catch his breath and rushes at him with a knife. M21 blocks the first attack barely, but the Shark pushes on with the attack, making it harder and harder for him to defend himself. He realizes that the Shark is much stronger than him, and if this keeps going on, he has no chance of surviving all this. The Shark finally manages to break through his defense and cuts him on the shoulders and legs before landing a special attack that delivers countless slashes to his body, bloodying him up. He backs off and drops to one knee, trying to catch his breath, while Fatty calls from behind him, telling Shark not to kill him. The Shark, however, starts moving forward but stops when he sees Sierra and Regis behind M21. He looks behind him and is shocked to see both of them. He tells them to leave immediately and that they should have never been here. Regis, however, is confident in his abilities and starts shit-talking Shark. This annoys him and tries to attack Regis, but M21 comes in between, taking the hit and saving Regis. Regis, however, still doesn't care and starts talking again, but this time M21 shouts at him to shut up, which surprises him. The Shark moves forward but is stopped halfway when a guy lands behind M21 and tells the Shark to stop. He looks behind him and realizes that the guy is Cran, the leader of DA5. He tells Shark to back off as they want him alive, and tells M21 that he is coming with them. M21 agrees to go with them without further resistance if they let both Regis and Sierra go unhurt, as the leader promises him before they escort him away. Regis and Sierra return to Frank's house, but when asked about M21, Regis simply shrugs it off because he is annoyed at him for stopping him from battling them. Frank asks Sierra what happened, and she informs him that they were walking back when they spotted M21 with two people who she doesn't know. They seem to be having a quarrel, but at the end of it, M21 voluntarily walked back with them. Frank thanks her for the information and thinks about what could have happened. He knows that the people that Sierra is talking about must be the members of the Union, but he doesn't know whether M21 went with them to save Regis and Sierra, or whether he was actually a spy sent to get information on Ray, and finally, when his job was done, he returned. M21 is taken to a safe house, where he is being beaten up by Shark to get information out of him. Kranz, however, tells him to stop and asks M21 to simply tell them what happened to the coffin he was tasked with retrieving. When he refuses to answer, Kranz asks whether he has been ordered by the Union to stay quiet. This makes M21 realize that they don't seem to know that he betrayed the Union and released the novelist from the coffin. Shark again starts kicking him, saying that his mission doesn't matter as of now because the mission of the DA5 takes priority. And 21 realizes that he could use this situation for his benefit and decides to stall them. He tells them that he will give them information only if they are willing to make an agreement. Kranz looks at him and tells him that he is in no position to bargain, and if he wants, he can simply use the truth serum created by the Union on him. M21 simply smirks at him and tells him that the truth serum will work on him, and he will die before he gives them the information that they want. The only way out is to make an agreement with him. Kranz asks what he wants, and he replies that he needs information about all of his comrades who died in M24 as well. Kranz tells him that he cannot make that agreement because he himself has no information about them. And 21, however, knows about the members of the DA5 and tells him that they have a hacker on their team and hacking the Union's system should be child's play for him. The hacker named Tao smiles from behind and tells him that he is indeed correct. Kranz tells him that they have a deal and asks him about the information, but he tells them that he is hungry and wants to eat first, trying to buy as much time as possible. Shark and Fatty are left in charge of M21 and Shark immediately starts hitting him, asking for information. M21, however, tells him that he will only provide any information after he receives his part of the deal. Shark gets mad at him and draws a knife out, threatening him. M21 calls his bluff and tells him that if he kills him, he will go against the direct orders of Kranz and will lose any information he could have gotten out of him. Just then, a long-haired guy arrives with Tao and tells Shark to back off. Shark unleashes his frustration on his teammate and calls out the long-haired guy for being a softie. He berates him for letting the woman and the children live when their job was to clear the area. The long-haired guy tells him that they were of no harm to them, and that's why he let them live, but Shark reveals that after the long-haired guy left, he ended up killing all of them anyway. This gets a reaction from the long-haired guy, whom I am going to call Pony from now on because of his ponytail. So Pony takes out his gun and aims it at Shark, but Tai quickly jumps and grabs his arm, telling him not to do anything stupid. Shark simply walks past him, telling him that he will take the information from M21 one way or another. On the other side, Regis is returning from school alongside his Shin and the loser when he suddenly spots Shark and Fatty off in the distance, standing on a building. Shin turns around to talk to him, but Regis disappears completely and meets Shark and Fatty in an abandoned park. Shark commends his bravery but tells him that it is extremely stupid, but in return, Regis throws massive insults at him, leading Shark to throw his knife at Regis. Regis easily grabs the knife midair and tells Shark that a weakling like him can't do anything. Shark gets mad, rushes towards him with his knives and tries attacking him, but Regis is easily able to dodge his attacks while backing off and suddenly uses a skill that makes his entire body freeze up. Regis tries to land a straight hit, but Shark manages to partially block it, only resulting in a scratch on his face. He tries attacking him again, but Regis again uses a time stop before trying to hit him, but this time Shark also manages to dodge the attack by a hair's margin, saving his vitals. They both go at it again, but Fatty throws a bunch of small explosives, which forces both of them to back off. He throws a pill at Shark and tells him not to take Regis lightly. Shark reluctantly pops the pill in his mouth and suddenly his muscles start growing and his aura changes completely. His speed becomes absurdly fast, as within a blink he appears behind Regis and tries to attack him, but Regis jumps back. To his surprise, however, Shark appears behind him again and dodges when Regis tries to land a punch. He tries to throw a knife at Regis again, but he easily blocks it before trying to use his special skill, which doesn't work this time. Shark laughs at him and tells him that his trick won't work on him anymore, before mocking him. This makes Regis angry, and before he could even react, he appeared behind Shark and punched him in the spine, making Shark yelp in pain as he never expected Regis to be this powerful. He would have died, but Regis stops himself in the middle, as Fatty brings the attention to himself and shows the unconscious bodies of Shin and the loser on the floor, telling him to come with them silently. Regis complies reluctantly and is captured by them. In the safe house, M21 is taken to a different room, where he is shocked to see Regis, Shin, and the loser lying on the floor, while Shark threatens to kill them if he doesn't talk. Back at Frank's place, Sierra walks up to Frank and Ray, informing them that something has happened to Regis. She explains that both she and Regis have a very faint neural connection with each other that both of them can feel. According to her, it only gets lost when one of them is either unconscious or dies, which means that Regis is either unconscious or dead at the moment. She thanks them for their hospitality and tells them that she is going to find Regis. Frank tells Ray that Shin emailed him, saying that both he and his loser friend are also coming over to play games, but now that he tried to contact them, none of them are picking up the call either. This prompts Ray to get up, and both he and Frank start following Sierra. Back at the safe house, Regis finally wakes up to see himself surrounded by the members of the DA5 faction. Shark tells M21 to reveal any information that he has while he puts a knife to Regis's throat, but M21 turns his face around, claiming that Regis is just an insufferable brat who he doesn't care about, and they are free to do as they please. Regis, however, is as sharp-tongued as usual and starts insulting Shark again, which results in a swift kick to the face. Finally, Shin also wakes up and is shocked to see himself surrounded by these men, but immediately his attention goes towards his unconscious loser friend. He tries to wake him up, and as he wakes up, Shin looks around and spots Regis, battered up, and M21 standing in the distance. He asks M21 what is happening, but he doesn't reply. Regis, however, butts in by saying that M21 has traded his humanity for power, so you cannot expect much from him anyway. Both he and the loser are very confused by this and try to talk to M21, but he refuses to reply. Shark picks Shin up by grabbing him from the collar and puts a knife on his throat, trying to get a response out of M21, but he doesn't budge, claiming that he only knows the kids as some random high schoolers that went to the school where he was posted. Shark gets mad at this and kicks Shin to the floor before stomping on his head. Pony tells him to tone it down, but Shark tells him to shut up as they are no use to them anyway, so it doesn't matter whether they live or die. He adds that it would be better if they died because now they have seen them. Tao, however, tells him to stop, claiming that their memory erasure drugs should be enough to wipe their memories and they won't have to kill these kids, but Kranz intervenes, saying that the kids will have to die, shutting both Pony and Tao down. Shark is happy to hear this and pushes Tao away to make his way towards the loser, but Shin grabs his legs and doesn't let go. He shakes Shin off and decides to kill the loser, but Regis jumps in between them, still bound by the special shackle that stops his powers. Shark tells him to move out of the way, but Regis, as usual, ends up skulking Shark, making him angry again, which results in a big punch to Regis's face. He moves towards him again and picks him up by the hair, but before he can hurt him, Shin decides that he has had enough and jumps in to attack Shark. Shark thinks that Shin is like any other high schooler and decides to simply punch him away, but he dodges his punch and delivers one of his own on his face. Shark drops Regis to the ground and turns towards Shin, grabbing both of his hands and then his throat before starting to choke him to death. The loser immediately runs up to him and grabs his arm, trying to make him let go, begging him to not kill him, even biting his hands to try and stop him. But Shark doesn't care and keeps choking Shin out to the point where his body goes limp and he becomes unconscious. Regis can do nothing but watch because of his shackles, but suddenly, M21 decides that enough is enough and runs up to Shark, becoming Wolverine again and slashes his right arm, forcing him to drop Shin, saving his life. On the other side, Sierra has arrived at the safe house and walks towards the entrance, where her way is blocked by Fatty, who asks her what her job is here with an ugly smile. Sierra calmly tells him to move out of the way, but Fatty realizes that she is one of the nobles with special powers and immediately throws a bunch of bombs at her while simultaneously backing up. He smiles, thinking that he has hurt Sierra, but as the dust clears, he sees her silhouette and feels an intense pain in his torso, seeing that his torso has been slashed open by Sierra without him even realizing. He decides that this is not a good place to fight and throws some more bombs at her before disappearing. Ray and Frank also follow her, but instead of going through the main entrance, they land on the rooftop like total bosses. They are met by a pony over there who is waiting for them to come. He asks them about the reason they are here, and Frank, like the coolest guy ever, tells Ray to go ahead as he will join him later before he manifests dark energy around his fists and attacks our pony. Pony, however, shouldn't be taken lightly as he carries an entire briefcase for his defense and blocks his punch before attacking Frank, who also dodges, and they basically end up exchanging their starting positions. Frank mocks Pony's weapon of choice and creates a bunch of dark energy shards and shoots them at Pony, who again uses his briefcase as a shield, while Frank starts getting serious and slashes the entire roof into two parts. As the dust clears, however, Pony shoots him with his sniper, but Frank is easily able to dodge it and rushes towards him once again, but backs off and Pony uses his gun as a melee weapon. He then again tries to use his dark energy to punch him, but Pony is able to point a second hidden pistol at his head, trying to checkmate him. Frank dodges and Pony takes out 2 pistols and starts shooting him, while running as Frank keeps dodging him. Frank uses a very strong slash made up of dark energy, but Pony dodges it and lands on the ground. He then realizes that if this keeps happening, Frank will get the upper hand, so he also grabs the pill and pops it in his mouth. He undergoes a similar metamorphosis and transforms into a black guy with a dark aura. Is this considered blackface? Frank tries to attack him again, but before he can move an inch, Pony simply jumps behind him and aims his gun at his head. Meanwhile, M21 knows that he cannot defeat Shark if he recovers and pushes in with an attack, but Shark is able to defend himself and kicks M21 back before swinging his blade in the air, which is enough to slash through M21's clothing, revealing his roided-up muscles. Shark, however, seems to get insecure about his own body and decides to unleash a flurry of slashes at him, which he is able to dodge and finally grabs his hand while Shark tries to stab him. He kicks M21 again in such a way that he is standing right in front of the kids. He then uses one of his strongest slashes, knowing that M21 won't move out of the way, as if he does, the kids behind him will die. M21 does exactly as he hoped and takes the brunt of the damage, which bloodies him up, and he falls down to his knees. Shark walks towards him and tells him to give up, but he stands up again. Shark raises his knife to end the fight, but Regis is able to break through his shackles just at that moment and appears in front of M21, punching Shark in the gut and blasting him into the wall. Regis tells M21 to back off and he gets ready to fight him. Shark immediately gets up and uses his pill because he knows he is no match for him in his normal form. Regis, however, seems on a rampage as he doesn't give a damn and jump kicks him before punching him on the head, throwing him away. Shark gets down on his knees and Regis walks up to him to finish the job, but before he could deliver the final blow, Kranz jumps in between, making Regis fall back. He immediately eats the pills as well and asks Shark whether he can stand. Shark stands up happily, thinking that together with Kranz they will end this fight, but to everyone's surprise, Kranz punches straight through Shark's torso and drains him entirely, making him much more powerful than he already was. Regis looks at him in disgust and uses his magic blast at him, but Kranz simply smacks it away, shocking him. He immediately rushes at Kranz with a magic punch, but Kranz dodges and smashes his head on the ground. Regis lays down on the ground, but Kranz has had enough and he starts moving towards M21. But Regis is not done yet and he gets up once again to charge up another magic blast at Kranz. He stands there panting, but as the dust clears, he is horrified to see Kranz is completely fine, and he immediately rushes towards Regis and gives him such a strong uppercut that he smashes into the ceiling and becomes unconscious. He starts walking towards M21 again, but stops to see a mysterious figure walking towards him, who turns out to be Cool Dude Ray. On top of the roof, Pony has Frank at gunpoint, and Frank is contemplating whether or not to release his actual powers, as Ray told him not to release his actual powers without his consent, but he also realizes that if he doesn't use his latent power, he might lose this duel, but to him, following his master's order is more important. Pony, however, ended up using the wrong words at the wrong time by telling Frank that after he kills him, he will kill that idiot who went inside. This enrages Frank to madness, and he gets surrounded by a dark aura which even starts burning away the gun that Pony had in his hands. He quickly backs off, confused at what was happening, but Frank tells him that the biggest mistake that he made up until now in his entire life was bad-mouthing his master, Ray. By the time he controls his anger, he has already released his true powers. He blames Pony for this and tells him that he will have to pay for this as well. A giant whirlpool of dark energy envelops the sky, turning everything purple, and then with the speed of lightning, a spear made up of dark energy pierces through Pony's body, pinning him to the ground. Frank then uses his magical energy to corrupt his gun, but he throws it away in time to save himself. Frank throws several more spears at him, which Pony runs to try and dodge, but one of them again stabs him through the leg, making him drop to one knee. Frank walks towards him and mocks him for talking big but being super weak. This provokes Pony and he tries to shoot Frank, but instantly another spear stabs him through the arm, stopping him. Frank finally has enough and creates a bunch of energy spears in the air and shoots them at Pony. He, however, gets one last boost of inspiration and is able to defect the spears, moving back and then points the gun at Frank, shooting at him. Frank, however, doesn't even move and lets the bullet come near him. But to Pony's surprise, the bullets stop as soon as they come close to his face and fall off. Frank then uses a blast of dark energy, which hurts Pony badly and makes him cry out in pain. Pony, however, is made up of real tough material and still ends up jumping over Frank, shooting at his face. Frank turns around to show that one of the bullets grazed his face, leaving a small trail of blood on his face. Frank looks at Pony and asks him why he is still fighting so bravely when there is no way he could win, but Pony ignores him and rushes towards him once again, while Frank shoots a bunch of magic blades at him, which he is able to dodge and appears behind Frank, aiming a gun at his head again, but Frank simply uses his magic energy to grab Pony's entire body, twisting the gun out of his hand. He then reveals his true power, and another huge cloud of dark energy forms above them as he converts all of them into countless spears and shoots all of them at Pony while holding him in place, leaving no room for his escape. Pony gets stabbed by the spears and his powers wear off entirely as he returns to his normal self and falls over to the ground. Sierra also arrives at the scene and watches as Frank goes towards the fallen Pony, ready to end his misery. Sierra, who is very kind, asks Frank if he is actually going to kill Pony, to which he replies that he is. But before he could kill him, Pony looked at Sierra and told her that the kids were in danger below and they should quickly hurry there to save them. He also asked her to apologize from his side to the kids for putting them in danger. This sudden show of care towards the kids makes him reconsider, and Frank decides not to kill him. Sierra goes back inside and while walking through the upper floor ends up meeting with Fat again, who has taken the pill and is jacked up, holding an entire rocket launcher in his hands. He shoots a projectile at her, but she simply deflects it with her hands before summoning her sole weapon, which is a scythe. Fatty again shoots a shell at her, but this time she retorts by using her scythe and splits the projectile in half, while also cutting Fatty into 2 fat pieces. On the main floor, Rye enters the room and walks straight up towards Kranz. Kranz looks at him and asks him who he is, but Rye retorts by asking who the hell gave him permission to speak. Kranz is stunned at this statement, but before he could say anything, a sudden heaviness was felt in the air and suddenly, both he and Tao were pinned to the ground by an extraordinary amount of gravity, which is one of the numerous powers that Rye has. Kranz tries to move, but Rye again asks him whether anyone has given him permission to move, and he slams his face to the ground without even touching it. Kranz somehow manages to get up and slashes in the air, which destroys the pillars behind Ray, but he himself stands unscathed. Kranz takes his twin blades out and gets ready for a duel. He jumps towards Ray and attacks him with one of the blades. The attack is so powerful that almost the entire area crumbles and dust is everywhere. Shin and the others are scared for Ray, as they still have no idea how strong he actually is. As the dust clears, however, they realize that Ray was simply able to stop Kranz's attack completely by grabbing his hand, and then simply saying the word "Begone Thought," which results in Kranz getting blasted back into the walls. Kranz gets out of the crevice and realizes that even after absorbing the shark already, he is still no match for this boy, so he screams at Tao to run over to him and use his pill so Kranz can absorb him as well. Everyone tells him not to go, but Tao knows that he also has a duty that he has to fulfill. He walks over to Kranz, ready to take the pill, but Kranz is so impatient that he holds his head in the air and then tells him to quickly eat the pill. The loser feels really bad for Tao, as he was trying to help the kids all along and was nice to them. He begs Ray to save him as he is a good person, but Kranz tells Tao to quickly transform and then threatens to kill the loser first. This was enough to enrage Tao, who uses his magic to wrap cords around Kranz's neck, pushing him back and jumps towards the side of our group, claiming that he will never support him for hurting kids, but an angry Kranz has super speed and is able to reach up to Tao very easily, grabbing his face once again, and was about to land a powerful punch, which will kill him. But he is stopped by Ray, who merely speaks the word "stop," and that is enough to stop Kranz's empty body into place. Ray is so cool that after doing that, he walks up to the loser and asks him why he begged him to save Ray's life. The loser seems confused and apologizes, but Ray tells him that they are friends and he can simply ask him for help. He then turns towards Kranz and decides to end the fight. He raises his hand and suddenly, each and every droplet of blood inside the room starts swirling around his head. This totally shocks even Regin, who remarks that only the nobles could do that kind of magic. Kranz tries to dodge the blood splashing around him, but he realizes that if this keeps up, he will end up losing, so he decides to rush towards Ray. But he is ready and uses his magic to push him back before using all of the blood in the area to completely shred Kranz to the point that he is erased from existence. The battle gets over and finally they all return home. And 21 and Pony are nursed back to health, while Frank apologizes for releasing his powers when he should have asked for his consent. But Ray tells him that he trusts him and knows that if he broke his promise to Ray, there is definitely some kind of reason that gave him no other choice. Frank is delighted to hear that his master trusts him so much and beams at him before walking to the dining table to have breakfast. After breakfast, M21 overhears Pony and Tao talking about how they want to leave the Union and pretend to be dead, as they have no other place to go. M21 hears this and goes over to Frank before they can leave and bows in front of him, begging him to let these two stay with him. as he knows that Union will find and kill them otherwise. Frank smiles at him and tells him that he doesn't have to beg him for anything, as this is his home as well, and of course they can stay in this house as they can be used as important assets as well. Shin and the loser are finally strong enough to attend the school again after being fully healed at Frank's house. They both enter the school gates to find both Tao and Pony dressed in a security uniform alongside M21. Because of their cool clothes and sharp demeanor, they are being sworn by girls left and right as if they were a K-pop band. Shin is jealous because not even a single girl is giving him any attention, whereas as soon as Rai enters the school alongside Regis and Sarah, all of the girls start fangirling over him as well. Inside of the class, Shin is still sad about the fact that he gets no bitches, and later when they go inside of the canteen, it pains him even more, as even though Ray is simply waiting for his ramen to cool down, all of the girls seem to flock up to him for no reason. Loser asks Shin what kind of girl he is interested in, but before he could reply, he spots Regis and Sarah entering the class, and observing her elegant demeanor, he ends up confessing that he likes Sarah. Loser asks Ray whether he will help Shin go out with Sarah, and he replies that he will. After that, they all move towards the hallway behind Sarah, where they find all the girls grouped around the 3 security guards, which makes Shin even more sad. They all meet behind the school, where the loser explains that Shin wants to go on a date with a girl but doesn't know how to do it, as he has never done it before. All of the 3 men try running away, as they themselves don't seem to have much experience in this matter either, but they are all stopped by Shin and the loser, begging them for help. Tao decides to open Bing, which is the best browser ever created, and starts looking at WikiHow articles about getting maximum Riz, whereas Pony decides to teach Shin the old school way of doing things but ends up getting embarrassed. Finally, after losing all hope, they end up going to Frank, who proudly tells them about his exploits and how he had so much Riz that even if he breathed, the girls around him used to go crazy. He tells them that if he wants to go out with Sarah, he should learn about what she likes and what she doesn't like. This seems like an excellent idea to them, and they end up going to Regis and ask him about Sarah, but he replies that he doesn't know anything about her, as they barely talk. They only work together because they have to, and apart from that, he has no interest in knowing about her. He starts moving away when M21 pokes at him by saying that he probably has no bitches and never even smelled a girl before. This makes Regis angry, who tells him that he is very popular among girls and he doesn't need to prove anything before moving away. He, however, is again stopped by M21 poking fun at him, as they are always at each other's throat. Just then, however, Rai ends up commanding Regis to help Shin, and he immediately kneels down and agrees. Later, they all go down to the library, where he instructs Shin to write a love letter to Sarah, but this dyslexic idiot has no idea how to write anything that isn't mindless scribbling. He ends up getting fed up and walks away, crumpling the paper and throwing it away. Afterwards, they decide to play towards Shin's strengths, which is his athleticism. They organize a basketball match after dividing the team, so that Shin can look cool while playing amazing, and the rest kind of just let him win. The game starts and the ball ends up going towards Ray, who has never played this game before. He simply grabs the ball with an extremely menacing aura surrounding him, but instead of dribbling or passing, he simply walks towards them, which becomes a foul and the game starts again. Shin is able to get his hands on the ball and tries to shoot for a basket, but ends up missing, and the loser friend again passes it towards Ray, who simply dodges the ball elegantly without even moving. The ball goes towards Regis, but instead of passing it towards Shin, this competitive idiot ends up rushing past them, and when Tao tries to take the ball away, he simply shows him his NBA level skills and drops him. He tries to secure a basket, but is stopped by M21, who then engages in a vicious competitive battle with him, in which both of them keep trying to one-up each other. Tao decides to intervene and throws the ball towards Shin, but M21 ends up getting the ball and secures a basket for their team. This fires up Regis as well, as the competitive spirits skyrocket, and they both keep shooting for baskets one after the other. Finally, the ball again goes to Ray, who shoots it towards the end with such an incredible speed that no one dares to block it as it goes towards Shin. Shin grabs the ball and decides to not waste this as he runs towards the hoop, but just before he can secure the basket, Pony ends up blocking the ball to everyone's surprise and shoots a three-pointer and secures the victory for their team, only later remembering that this game was supposed to make Shin look better. Shin and the loser sit outside the school as he doesn't think that anything can be done now. Regis and Sarah both arrive at the location, and Regis tells him that he is summoned to Frank's house and walks away, while Sarah waits behind and hands him a crumpled paper, which turns out to be the love letter that he was trying to write. Apparently, Rai ended up giving the letter to Sarah, and she tells Shin that she likes him the best when he is being himself, and they all walk together towards Frank's house. They all reach Frank's house, where the atmosphere seems to be a bit serious. When the loser asks what's up, Frank replies that they are going to erase their memories, surprising them completely. Shin calls bullshit and says that there is nothing like a memory eraser, but Frank replies that they have already rewritten their memory twice before, as the existence of nobles and superhumans like M21, Tau, and Pony cannot become human knowledge. They both try to fight this, but even Ray claims that this is how it needs to be and starts sipping his tea. They both finally agree to it, and Rai uses his special abilities to rewrite their memories and erases all the memories of the supernatural events that took place. The next day, while Tao and 21 and Pony were near the front gates of the school, an unknown old man, dressed fully in white, walks up to the school and tries to walk past them. The three men confront him and ask for any sort of identification, but the man simply tells them to back off, while emitting a really strong aura around him. Before they can do anything, however, Regis and Sarah both just appear before them, kneeling down, while the old man asks Regis, why are these measly humans in their way? Regis tries to speak, but is interrupted by the old fellow, who shames him for forgetting that he is an ability. Suddenly, Frank arrives from behind and addresses the old man as Gage, while the old guy is shocked to see Frank here. He takes Gage back to his house, where Gage inquires whether Sarah and Regis are living with these humans, and is horrified when Frank says they are, because this is his house and he can decide who lives here and who doesn't. Gage enters the room, where he finds Ray sitting quietly, sipping tea. Gage asks him whether he has any recollection of the past 800 years, but he replies that he was in a deep sleep. Gage claims that both Sarah and Regis were sent here to investigate Ray's coffin, as the things in Lucadonia, the place where all nobles reside, has changed greatly. When Rai entered his eternal sleep, many great lords and even the previous ruler followed and entered a deep sleep. In nobles, an eternal sleep is synonymous with death, and because Rai was the reason the other lord basically died, the new ruler, who is the daughter of the previous ruler, has deemed Rai as a traitor and wants to kill him. Gage claims that the mantle of the clan leaders have come upon the younger generation and tells them that even Sarah is one of the clan leaders. Frank makes fun of the country, which was once so powerful, but is now being reduced to nothing. He asks Ray whether he would want to return to Lucadonia, but Rai simply sips on his tea and responds that he will stay here for some time longer. Gage and Frank start talking, when Jedge replies that he still doesn't trust Frank because of what he did such a long time ago, when he was known as the Noble Hunter. We see a flashback where Frank tortures some of the lower-ranking nobles to gain more information from them inside of his dungeon. The nobles seem to be shocked to see a human in possession of such immense power, but Frank simply claims that he is there to make sure the nobles don't think that they can do anything that they want just because they are powerful. He moves out of the dungeon when he feels a huge explosion, as a bunch of nobles have breached his mansion. He runs outside while the nobles are just behind him, finally cornering him on a cliff's edge. They tell him to stop resisting and come with them to the castle, but he refuses while mocking them and uses his mystical powers to obliterate the entire group at once. By the time he is done with all of these small fries, two of the clan leaders appear before him, one of them being Gage and the other one named Rhaegar. They surround him and tell him that he needs to follow them back to the castle where the Lord is waiting for him, but Frank simply uses an energy blast, which Rhaegar is able to dodge. Rhaegar tells Gage to wait behind, as he is going to take care of Frank alone, and moves ahead before delivering a swift uppercut, which Frank is able to block thankfully, but the impact still throws him in the air. Frank uses his dark abilities to send 1,000 spears towards Rhaegar, but he is able to dodge them, and the spears end up cutting through an entire boulder. They both engage in hand-to-hand combat once again and come to a standstill before Frank pushes him back, forcing Rhaegar to take out a magical weapon from his ass. Gage seems to be surprised that Frank is strong enough that Rhaegar is forced to use his ass weapon, but Frank doesn't break a sweat, as he expected him to take out a weapon sooner rather than later. Frank, however, laughs at his face, telling him that his ass weapon smells like shit, before summoning his own dark spear from the sky, surprising both Gage and Rhaegar. Gage comments that the weapon is almost as strong as Rhaegar's ass weapon, and tells him to be careful before the fight begins. Frank slices the air with his weapon, forcing both of the nobles to dodge out of the way as the mountains behind them get sliced to pieces. He walks towards them once again, telling him that they need to learn that they can't do anything they want with the humans just because they are powerful, and launches an attack once again, only to be intercepted by Rhaegar. Rhaegar asks him what the hell is he talking about, as nobles are bound to protect humans at any cost, but Frank tells him that not all nobles are very noble people, as a lot of them use their power to take advantage of helpless women and children, and it is his goal to teach these nobles that humans are neither as helpless nor as weak as they believe they are. He releases even more of his latent powers, pushing both of the nobles back, but the weapon starts taking control of his body, making him go berserk. Gage tells Rhaegar that if they don't stop him before he loses control, he can create a lot of destruction, and pulls out a giant weapon from his ass and rushes towards Frank alongside Rhaegar. There is a huge explosion, and by the time the dust settles, they notice that Frank has escaped, leaving a trail of blood behind. Frank is able to get his body back under his control, rushes back to a nearby mansion, and enters one of the rooms only to find Rhae standing by the window elegantly. Frank thinks that he entered the house of some wealthy landlord, not knowing that he is the strongest noble around, and immediately tells Rhae that he is here to start his job today as the master of the house. Rhae informs him that he himself is the master of this house, and no one apart from him lives here. Suddenly, the gate opens again before Gage and Rhaegar enter the room, immediately bowing to Rhae, apologizing for their rude behavior, before telling him that the Lord of Nobles has ordered them to capture and bring back this man to him. Rhae looks at them, and then looks at the injured Frank, before using his magic to convert his shirt and pant into the proper dress of a butler, and tells both Rhaegar and Gage that from now on Frank works for him, and he doesn't want him to visit the Lord just yet. Both Gage and Rhaegar bow again and promise that they will relay this information to the Lord. 5 years have passed after that, and Rhaegar regularly spars with Frank to teach him how to control his energy better, but each time Frank ends up losing if he doesn't use his full strength, and whenever he uses it, he loses control. Gage advises Rhae once again to let the Lord meet with Frank once, as it has already been 5 years, and finally Rhae agrees and orders Frank to meet with the Lord once. Frank is escorted to the Lord's chambers, where he is surrounded by a bunch of nobles who despise him. The Lord seems to be very impressed by Frank because, according to him, Rhae doesn't let anyone come near him and never meets with anyone because of being very reserved. It is very surprising that he is letting Frank be with him for such a long time, which even makes him jealous of the bond he has cultivated. Frank looks at him and tells him that none of the nobles ever really tried to get to know Rhae better, and that is the reason why he doesn't like anyone else. The Lord laughs and asks him why he doesn't create a blood pact with Rhae, to which Frank replies that he still has his dignity as a human and doesn't want to bid his life into the servitude of a noble. The Lord tells him that if he creates a blood pact, he will be able to live as long as Rhae lives, but Frank still seems to be concrete on his position, claiming that he is not going to make a pact anytime soon. One of the red-haired nobles speaks up, telling the Lord that he cannot let this man create a blood pact with Rhae, as he has killed countless nobles before, but the Lord replies that Rhae's happiness comes before anything else for him. While heading back inside of the hallways, he ends up meeting Gage and asks him whether he would like to spar with him, but Gage refuses. Frank was about to go back when the red-haired noble alongside some of his cronies approached him, and the red-haired guy agreed to spar with him. Both Frank and the red-haired guy go inside an arena, and their battle begins. The red guy seems to have an upper hand as he keeps overpowering Frank with each attack that he throws, and is finally able to make him kneel, but Frank stands up again and summons his dark spear. The red dude attacks him once again, but this time Frank is able to defend himself, but the red dude increases his intensity and is able to push him against a rock finally. Frank gets mad at him and ends up using his full power alongside the spear, but ends up losing control of himself and goes berserk. He stabs the eye of the red dude before both Gigi and Rhaegar intervene, stepping in front of the red dude, telling him to back off as he is no match for Frank as of now. Frank in his berserk form uses a huge magical blast, which is suddenly stopped by Rhae and the Lord himself. Rhae walks towards Frank as he uses another powerful blast, but Rhae is able to stop it easily, but gets scratched on the cheek. He uses his blood magic to create a tornado around themselves as Frank rushes in with his spear, but Rhae simply blocks it with one hand, before touching Frank on the cheek, turning him back to normal. Frank finally wakes up in Rhae's bed and quickly dresses up before going to meet Rhae, who asks him for a cup of tea. While making the tea, however, Frank uses a knife to cut himself and pours a couple of blood drops into the tea, before handing it over to Rhae, who drinks it and ends up forming a lifelong blood bond with Frank. Fast forward to today, Frank tells Gage that Rhae doesn't want to go back to Lucadonia as of now, as he is very happy over here. He is surrounded by friends and is exploring the world that he never knew existed. Gage takes a huge sigh and tells him that he will be returning back to the kingdom and will have to report back to the current lord about these happenings, but allows both Sierra and Regis to stay here for a while longer and leaves. A couple of days later, while the trio were patrolling the perimeter, they suddenly feel like someone has mind-controlled a bunch of students as they start acting weirdly. Rhae, Regis, and Sierra also feel the presence of another noble, but before Rhae could move, Regis offers to go in his place instead and moves down towards the ground. The trio finally confront the invader, who turns out to be a young noble boy who seems to be confused as to why the trio didn't get affected by his mind control, and before any of them could even react, he appears behind M21 and stabs him in the back with his bare hands and moves back before Tao can attack. M21 immediately falls to the ground as the young boy looks disgusted because of the blood stain on his hands and wipes off the handkerchief. Before he can do any further damage, both Regis and Sierra arrive, telling him to stop. The young boy named Rael looks back and seems to be overjoyed by seeing Sarah and asks him whether she has thought about his proposal of being married to him, but Sarah doesn't reply. He tells her that he was released from the confinement today itself since the time when his older brother locked him inside a room because he destroyed an entire area when Sarah rejected him. Regis tries to talk back, but Rael immediately grabs his throat and threatens to squeeze the life out of him, before Sarah tells him to let him go, and he throws Regis back like a ragdoll, surprising both Pony and Tao, as Regis himself is an incredibly powerful being. He looks back at Sarah, waiting for an answer, but Sarah simply rejects him again, and before he could threaten anyone else, she tells him that if he doesn't leave, she will contact his older brother once again. Rael decides to leave for now, but before going, he threatens the life of Regis if Sarah doesn't come to him and rushes off. Tao and Pony both start tending to M21 as he has lost consciousness and is in a fatal condition after receiving such a deep wound. He is taken to Frank's place, where he is kept in a special life support capsule while being constantly monitored. Tao and Pony narrate the entire incident to Ray and Frank, who seem to be perplexed at this new problem. Frank takes both Tao and Pony for a checkup, and after taking their full body scans, tells them that they seem to be fine. Both of them seem to be really sad at the fact that this boy is able to hurt their comrade fatally while they were unable to do anything. Frank looks at them and tells them that this boy is a pureblood noble from a very strong clan, and none of them stood a chance against him, but the two of them are still sad, and asks him for any way of gaining more strength as they don't want any of their comrades from being hurt in the future. Frank smiles at them and tells them that he will see what he can do before moving away. While Ray was drinking tea, he suddenly feels the presence of Sarah fading as she runs off to meet with Rael alone. He gets up and walks outside, where he finds Frank kneeling on the ground, telling him that he will take care of Rael, and that Ray doesn't need to put any effort for this. Ray tells him that right now Rael is much stronger than Frank or anyone else in their house, but Frank still insists that he let him deal with Rael. Ray ends up listening to him, but before letting him go, he removes the seal that he placed on Frank, so that he can use his full potential now without any problems. Frank arrives at the top of the building just in time, as after being rejected by Sarah once again, Rael was about to attack her, but Frank uses his dark magic spears to block his way, forcing him to back off. Frank walks towards him and asks him the reason for coming to this country, but Rael doesn't listen to him and immediately rushes forward to attack him, but his wild slashes are ineffective as they just whiz right through Frank without dealing any damage. Frank tells him that he made a very big mistake by harming M21 as he was under his protection, and now Rael will have to answer for this. After saying this, he starts using his dark energy and throws a bunch of spears at him, but Rael is able to dodge and moves back. Frank follows through and keeps attacking Rael, while he tries to run at top speed, but is shocked to see that Frank, a mere human, is able to match his speed as he keeps throwing spears at him. Finally, Rael decides to split into 3 images of himself and attacks Frank all at once, but Frank simply covers his surroundings with a bunch of dark magic spikes, which impales the young noble, injuring him gravely. Rael ends up using his full power and pulls out some weapons from his ass before attacking Frank, who doesn't even move, and takes the blow head-on, getting cut near both the shoulders, but to Rael's surprise, he simply starts laughing as according to him, the fight was becoming boring. Frank summons his dark spear, and the two clash head-on. Frank throws dark spikes toward Rael, but he simply divides himself into multiple images. But again, Frank is able to ward off the fake copies with his dark spikes, but Rael uses his ass weapon to slash the air, causing a lot of damage to the buildings behind Frank. He keeps slashing at Frank, while he simply dodges and back off until Regis arrives and intervenes with his own power blast, after which Sarah jumps in to try and hit him with her scythe, but Rael dodges away, shocked at Sarah's behavior. He asks Sarah if she really hates him this much, and she tells him that she doesn't want to see his face again. This enrages him, and he takes out a scroll which was given to him by the current ruler of the nobles, and by the order of the Lord, he commands Sarah to follow him and appear in front of the ruler herself. Because it was a royal command, Sarah is unable to refuse and goes behind him, vanishing in the night sky. Both Regis and Frank return back to his place, where Frank tells Ray about the happenings and they decide to go to Lucadonia themselves. Frank meets up with M21, Tao, and Pony before giving them a special drug that he has created which will release their latent powers and make them much stronger. They ask why is he giving it to them now, and he replies that he is going to Lucadonia with Ray and Regis and he would like them to stay here and make sure that everything is going alright. They protest this and tell him that they also want to help, but Frank refuses and walks off. He readies the plane, and alongside Regis and Ray, they end up taking their private jet to Lucadonia. Regis asks Frank where they are going to land as he doesn't remember the presence of any landing strips in that country. Frank simply smiles at him and informs him that they are going to crash land on a water body. After crashing in the river, they end up walking through a dark forest while trying to create a plan of attack until Regis tells them to stop as they are entering forbidden territory. Frank and Ray seem to be confused at this, but Regis explains that the previous lord asked them never to walk past these forests. Frank simply laughs and tells him that Ray's mansion is located at the end of this forest and he didn't want anyone meddling with his life, and that's why the ruler told everyone never to walk there. They finally enter the mansion, but Ray feels a strong aura coming from inside, so Frank tells Regis to wait here as they go inside to inspect. Ray and Frank walk past the familiar-looking corridors to a giant door, and they open it to see a giant magnificent sword sitting atop of a beautiful staircase. Frank immediately recognizes it as the Lord's sole weapon, while Ray seems to treat it as an afterthought and decides to move back to one of the rooms. Meanwhile, Regis ends up overhearing a bunch of noises from the jungle and goes out to investigate, only to find out a bunch of lower-ranking nobles searching through the forests to find the occupants of the crashed plane. He quickly covers his face up with a mask and descends upon them, knocking them out one by one, but gets overwhelmed by their large numbers, when suddenly a bunch of them are shot and killed by Tao, Pony, and M21, who are surprisingly hiding on top of the trees. Regis takes all of them to Ray and Frank, where they reveal that they ended up hiding inside the plane because they wanted to assist Ray and Frank in what they were doing. Ray looks at them with a smile and tells them that he had a bunch of empty rooms lying around anyways, so he doesn't really mind. They decide to get divided into teams so that Ray can reach the palace of the current leader without any delays. Ray and Frank walk together towards the castle, while Regis and M21 run alongside each other as rivals and as comrades to get rid of any enemies along the way. Both M21 and Regis are being provided cover and information by Tao and Pony, who are hiding amidst the trees ready for any kind of problems that they might encounter. While running through the forests, they suddenly spot a light in the sky, and none other than Rael himself descends from the sky angry at Regis for following them here. He tells both of them to leave this very instant, but obviously they both decline, standing defiantly in his way. On the other hand, Sarah, who was sent to one of the cells as a prisoner, has escaped and is running towards the Lord's chamber to prevent her from executing Gedge for treason. She, however, is stopped by a red-haired woman who blocks her way and tells her to return back to her cell, and if she does so, she will not alert the Lord about her misgivings, but Syria refuses. The red woman immediately hits her with one of the magic blasts, but amidst the rising smoke, Syria hits her back with one of her own attacks that she quickly dodges. They both go back and forth before Syria decides to get serious and summons Scythe from her ass, which forces the red woman to also summon a wand from her ass. She uses her wand to create a bunch of bee-blades and uses them to attack Syria, but she is able to block all of them with ease, but even after that, she ends up getting beaten and dominated by the more experienced red woman and taken captive. On the other hand, Griel tells Regis that Sarah is in prison right now just because of him and his family, as because his grandfather Gedge ended up betraying the Lord's trust. She ended up putting Sarah inside of a cell as well. This ends up affecting Regis, who loses his concentration, and Rael takes full advantage of that, attacking him immediately. Before he could reach Regis, however, a 21 intervenes and tries to claw Rael's face off, but he dodges the attack and backs off. M21 shakes Regis back to reality, telling him to concentrate and tells him to run ahead and save Syrah and his grandfather, while he takes care of this blonde bitch. Regis tells him that he cannot handle Rael alone, but M21 reassures him and tells him to leave, and before Rael could make any wisecracks, M21 lunges towards him with surprising speed, and even though Rael tries to dodge, he is able to scratch him in the face, surprising both Rael and Regis. Tao tells Regis to move on, as Frank gave them some blue meth created by Jess Pinkman with the chili powder, and with that, they are undefeatable. Regis acknowledges the powers of the blue meth and thanks them before moving ahead, while Rael is fuming at the fact that a mere human was able to hit him and lunges at M21, scratching him on the arm before trying to follow up with another attack, but is stopped by the bullets sent his way by the courtesy of our man, the Great Pony. Rail gets even more angry, daring Pony and Tao to walk out of their hiding place and fight like men, but they simply ignore him, as they know that patriarchy is dying anyway. Tao tells M21 that this is a good time to try and provoke him so that he loses his cool and makes mistakes. M21 is used to making these nobles angry, thanks to his experience with Regis, and starts making fun of Rail, calling him a sissy cuck, whose crush hates him. This angers Rail to no extent as he jumps in for the attack, trying to dodge the bullets, but one of the bullets end up grazing him, making him back off while M21 tries to attack him. He ends up backing off into a trap which is set by Tao, who activates it, and the area explodes with lightning energy. M21 is shocked to see Rail still standing as the dust clears, and his anger has reached his limits as he pulls out 2 blades from his ass, deciding to go all out on these humans. Ray and Frank notices these light shows from a distance, and Ray tells Frank to make sure the boys are okay, as he goes forward to find the castle alone. Rail uses his knife blades to hit M21, who gets hurt and starts bleeding all over, while Pony tries to assist him with cover fire, but Rail simply blocks the bullets with his ass weapon, telling them that now this nonsense is of no use. Both Pony and Tao decide that following the Vietnamese tactics is not going to help anymore, and they jump down the tree and rush towards M21 as Rail kicks him in the face before punching him down, but just before he can end his life with a swift stab, Tao enters the fray and blocks his attack with his whip. Pony, like a true American, starts blasting, but Rail is able to use his super speed to dodge all of their attacks and uses an air slash to throw them away before he walks up to them and starts kicking them in the face. M21 grabs his feet from behind, but Rail simply starts kicking his head as well. Before he could kill them, however, another noble appears besides Rail, who turns out to be the current leader of their clan, Rail's older brother, and the oldest son of Rhaegar, who once fought and trained Frank. The leader asks Rail what's going on before Rail starts telling him how he was just finishing the enemies off, when suddenly Frank arrives from behind them. Rail immediately recognizes him and tells his brother that this blonde guy attacked him when he tried taking Syrah away, but before he could complete his sentence, an angry Frank stabs him with hundreds of spikes, right in front of the leader, telling him that he is done with these games, and this might be their first life or death battle, but he has gone through battles like these countless times. The leader tells Rail to back off as Frank is way beyond his capabilities, and even before the fight starts, he pulls out his weapons from his ass, ready to fight Frank at his full capacity. Frank tells him that he once fought his dad, and later his dad taught him all he knows about battles, before taking his Dar spear out, and they proceed to clash, creating a huge explosion. After a bit of back and forth, the leader slashes at Frank, but he is able to block his attacks, creating a huge screen of smoke, which clears up and Frank realizes that the leader is nowhere to be seen. His family has been experts of ambushes, and this guy seems to be just as good, as he can't even feel his presence. The leader attacks Frank from his hidden position, which scratches him but also gives him the general direction of Rail's older brother, and he jumps up in the air, before throwing the 1,000 spikes everywhere, and slices through the jungle to reveal the leader, who jumps up in the air to save himself. The leader divides himself into multiple illusions and attacks Frank all at the same time, but he is able to defend against all of them at once, but Rail, the little snob, ends up attacking the trio, and while trying to block his attack, Frank ends up getting hit by the leader's attack, getting hurt. Instead of pushing his advantage, however, the leader stops and rebukes Rail for interfering in between and apologizes to Frank, telling him that if this little shit didn't intervene, Frank would have been able to defend against his attack without any damage, and to make it equal, he uses his ass weapon to cut himself as well. The leader attacks Frank again, but after a bit of struggle, Frank is able to stab him through the stomach, pushing him back. Rail gets worried and offers his ass weapons to his brother, who refuses, saying that they are smelly and that he will fight against Frank on his own. On the other side, Rai enters the Lord's chamber just at the right moment as Gage was kneeling down with Sarah, both bound, and he was going to be executed by the new Lord named Rask. She stops, however, as Rai walks in like a total Chad, changing the color of his clothes midway. Rai totally seals the show, walking in front of them, telling Rask that she cannot kill Gage as he forbids it. One of the clan leaders with white hair seems to be a hot-headed fool as he runs towards the literal god himself. He jumps up in the air and shoots some air blows at Ray, but they do nothing to him. The white-haired fool tries to attack Ray again, hitting him from all possible directions, while Ray doesn't even defend himself as his attacks are having no effect on him. Finally, he stops his attacks and uses his magic to simply throw him away. This excites the red woman, who summons a wand from her ass and uses it to attack Ray, but he simply absorbs the magic and sends it back at her, while one of the young leaders forms a wall to defend them. The young boy uses his shield to create a small box around him, which keeps getting smaller, about to crush Rai, but he simply breaks through it without breaking a sweat. All three of them get up and stand in front of Rask, but Rai simply uses his mind control to make them bend to his will. They are all shocked to see his abilities when Gage informs them that a noblest is even stronger than the Lord, as he is the only one who could punish the Lord themselves. Rask moves ahead and tells everyone else to back off as she is going to deal with him now. She takes out her sword and attacks Rai with it, who simply blocks her magic and uses a magic of his own, which Rask dodges before trying to hit him head-on with the sword, but Rai simply stops it with his hand and pushes her away into the wall. She gets up again and throws a slash at him, which gets blocked by the air surrounding him, before he tells her to use her full potential. This enrages her and she uses her full magic abilities and attacks him with her most powerful attack, but to her horror he simply blocks and breaks through her magic, crushing her spirits. She drops down on the floor, weeping, claiming that her dad never loved her. Well, my dad didn't love me either, but no one made me a lord. Why the special treatment? The kid, the white guy, and the red woman all stand in front of Rask and attack Rai once again. He dodges the white guy's attack, while in the air he is trapped by the boy, and the red woman tries to attack him in tandem, but he ends up beating all three of them back again and again. Rai finally uses his special ability to wipe them all out, but in a fit of inspiration, Rask ends up stepping up and uses her ultimate skill once again, neutralizing Rai's attack and even scratching him on the cheek, and he starts falling down on the ground, exhausted, but is grabbed by Frank himself. The fighting ceases and Rai produces a sword of his own from his butt, which looks very similar to the one that Rask has, and both of these swords combine together and a fairy emerges from the sword, who turns out to be Rask's dad. What a weirdo. Her dad tells her that Rai was not the one who killed him, as he wanted the game and himself and a bunch of other older leaders to pave the way for the younger generation to take the helm and make America great again. He left Gage behind on purpose so he could guide all of the young people to properly lead the nobility to a brighter future. But somewhere down the lane, Rask's jealousy got the better of her, and she started blaming Rai for everything, and alongside her, all of the other nobles blamed him as well. He ends the conversation by saying that he has trusted Rai to take care of Rask, and that he will always love her before he disappears. Gage looks at her and apologizes for keeping the truth from her, as he was instructed to do so by her father. Before she could say anything, one of the clan leaders arrives with Regis in hand, and he throws him in front of her, saying that he has something to say. Regis grovels in front of her and tells her that his grandfather is not a traitor, and if she wants to execute him, she should execute him as well, but Rask simply hugs the old man, saying that she was sorry and it was her fault. It seems like everything got solved amicably, as the trio alongside Frank, Rai, Regis, and Sierra return back to Japan, starting their lives as normal people once again, living among humans and hiding their supernatural abilities from them.